This is AIM Agenda. With me now, Kelly O'Dwyer of the Liberal Party and the new Labor frontbencher, Nick Champion, promoted this week. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Nick.
Thank you,
Long
Kelly.
Overdue,
Yes.
well recognised.
A long run up. A long run up.
Not before time. Let's
thanks
talk
so
about
much.
this drama yesterday. If I had said to you, Kelly, that Al Gore would be in the Great Hall of Parliament with Clive Palmer, you would have thought I was on something, wouldn't you? If I'd predicted this a week ago.
Look, I would have thought that was an unusual scenario, an unusual picture to paint, but wow, amazing things happen, don't they?
And so what's the government going to do in response? I guess the bottom line is you will be able to get the carbon tax repeal through, but not a lot of the associated measures.
Look, we're not going to be distracted from the fact that we made a commitment before the last election to repeal the carbon tax. The Labor Party really have been in the way of us being able to repeal the legislation. We could do it right now. In fact, we could have done it the first week of Parliament if we'd had the Labor Party on board to actually repeal the tax. They've been blocking it, which means we actually have to rely on people like Clive Palmer to help us repeal that tax, a tax that is costing the average family around $550 each year and is costing, for instance, hospitals, not-for-profit hospitals around $700,000 a year in an electorate like mine. This is just not right, and that's why we're committed to repealing it. We know it's putting a huge impost on business, and we would welcome Clive Palmer's support for that.
What about the things like the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the Climate Authority, the renewable energy target? Clive Palmer saying he's not going to support any change to those. Is that necessarily a big setback for the government's agenda?
Well, look, we heard a very, very short press release, policy by press release yesterday with Mr Palmer and Al Gore, and I think there was no questions that were asked after that. So I think, we're not entirely clear on exactly what his position is on all of those elements, but we're going to pursue our policy. We're going to talk to all of the crossbenchers in the Senate, and we're going to continue to prosecute our case.
Nick Champion, your thoughts on all of this? I guess I'll put the same point that I put to Kelly to kick off with, and this is bottom line, a win for Tony Abbott in the sense that he gets the repeal through.
Well, look, I think what we're seeing here is the Senate slowly but surely moving to a sensible position on climate change, which is keeping the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, keeping the RET, not launching this assault on it like the Liberal Party backbench do, and moving to an emissions trading system to deal with climate change. So that's the direction they're heading. Meanwhile, we've got the Liberal Party launching themselves further and further outwards into the sort of, not the lunar right, but the politics of denial. And that's what Kelly was appealing to in her articles in the AFR this week, in the Financial Review, talking about, they don't just want to get rid of, the carbon tax, but they want to get rid of the RET as well.
But
the renewable energy target, they want to get rid of that, which is a Howard government creation and something they voted for in the early parts of the Rudd government. So we now know we've got a whole lot of Liberal Party backbenchers appealing to a very small minority, an activist minority in our community who want to deny science, who want to deny the need to do something. And Kelly and others talk about costs. Well, there is no greater cost than global warming. Because the consequences of it could be potentially catastrophic.
What about yesterday, though? So you had Clive Palmer, his nickel refinery is one of the biggest polluting operations of that sort in the world, and then you've got Al Gore standing next to him. What went on yesterday? It was bizarre, wasn't it?
Well, look, politics now has a sort of... there is an unusual atmospherics to a lot of events, and you can't predict them, those sorts of things. But we can predict where the rest of the world's going, and the rest of the world is slowly but surely moving towards dealing with climate change. And sooner or later they're going to get binding targets, and they're going to be emissions trading systems. And the problem with the Liberal Party is they're moving further and further away from that idea into this sort of very weird cul-de-sac of climate denial, change denial. That's where they're headed. That's where they're headed.
Let's get Kelly's response, because you can respond to, whatever you want, but I guess the assertion from Nick about your piece in the Fin Review on the renewable energy target, and also, I guess, my take on what Nick's putting to you, I'd like to also put to you that, if you've got this position that Tony Abbott had said for many years that we will move when the rest of the world does, why not have this dormant ETS as Clive Palmer's putting forward so you can activate it when the rest of the world moves?
Well, the first point that Nick made, and he made several times over, is apparently the Liberal Party is a party of climate deniers. Of course, that is not true. You know, somebody like me, who actually fought an election campaign in a by-election in 2009, was actually asked their position on this, and I said, you know, man is making a contribution to our changing climate. I mean, it is just simply not correct to say that the Liberal Party has that point of view. We've always said that we need to do something, and it's a matter of what is the right decision to make in order to reduce our emissions. The article that I wrote in the Fin simply talked about the fact that it was appropriate to be reviewing the renewable energy target, to actually look at what it is that we are achieving with our
come
target.
on, that's
based
code.
on,
That's Morse code. Morse code to your Liberal Party branches.
Well, look, I know you want to have a massive scare campaign. I mean, you know, in an emergency, press the red button, cause a scare
the tragedy
campaign.
in all of this.
Let's hear Kelly first.
I mean, let's actually look at what is said, and in politics there are actually nuances. In a debate, you know, there is a little black and white, and you actually can discuss the detail, and that's what I was doing in my article.
So you support
on Monday.
the renewable energy target?
We said, we took our position to the last election that we would support the 20% reduction.
You stand by it?
The 20% renewable energy target and the 5% emissions reduction, and the party is true to that. But what we are also saying is let's have a look at the renewable energy target, whether or not it's actually going beyond that. There is evidence that's being presented to the review, which by the way is actually a legislated review, saying that it's more like 27%, which is having a huge impost on business. Now the question is, do we want it to be a 20% target? Do we want it to be higher?
Kelly,
let's actually have a debate about this, and let's not just do the default thing.
Why not have the nuance?
We're all for reviews, Kieran. You know, if there's a legislative review, that's fine. But the atmospherics around this, and Kelly's article, and all of the rest of this, the ginger groups that are forming, is all about Morse code to this climate denial bunch who are out there. They're a minority, and they're an activist minority. So they're pushing the Liberal Party down this route and away from Malcolm Turnbull's sensible position. And the tragedy is that people like Kelly who believe in markets, who are sensible, who should be on the front bench, are pushed into the same ginger groups as George Christensen and these people, you know, who are from the National Party and who are going to be the last people to acknowledge global warming is a problem. They're going to be the last people to acknowledge it. And that's a tragedy. That's the cul-de-sac.
So you're just
the Liberal Party, that Tony Abbott's taken the Liberal Party up.
A situation where Clive Palmer...
tragically, the country, the Labor Party's
You're
for an
a policy
emissions trading...
denier, just ignoring our policy.
The Labor Party's for an emissions... The Labor Party's for an emissions trading system. The Senate's working their way towards that point.
I want to ask you something about
That's a sensible policy.
So because Clive Palmer, if you look at the situation with his party recently, he's to the left of both parties on the issue of asylum seekers. He's to the right, arguably, of the coalition on climate change, because he's arguing for a market mechanism and you're doing this direct action plan.
Well,
so he seems to be wedging the government on a couple of different issues.
It's got more positions than the Kama Sutra. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, that brings up some pretty ugly imagery, Kelly. Pretty ugly imagery.
Okay, well, let's move on. I don't want to think about it. I think we've got 2 minutes left. 1 minute left. The GP co-payment, so 30 seconds each. The PM sounds like he's open to change on that?
Well, no, we're committed to our policy. We're actually going to continue our discussions with the crossbenchers in the Senate. We're committed to bringing all of our budget measures through. We are being blocked by the Labor Party at every turn, not only on this, but on the carbon tax repeal, as I've said before. But we are committed to it. We're going to pursue it.
Yeah.
This is a cascading co-payment, and every time you go see a doctor, every time you get a blood test, every time you get a bit of radiological work, $7 each time. So it's not 7, it's multiples of 7, and that's what people have got to remember. And the minute the Liberal Party backbench work that out, the minute they work out the costs involved in this for ordinary families, for workers, they are going to run a mile from it. So it's the Prime Minister.
We've got to go. Nick Champion, Kelly O'Dwyer, thanks both. Have a good day, and we'll be back after the break on AIM Agenda.